Welcome to the Voice of Thai podcast, a space for stories, insights, and conversations that uplift the profession of teaching and inspire positive change in international schools. For over 40 years, the International Educator has served this community through recruitment resources and a dedication to amplifying the voices of international educators around the world. I want to welcome everyone to our latest edition of the Voice of Thai podcast. I'm really excited to speak to two of the guests that we have today because we at Thai have been putting out a series around recruiting and getting ready for the recruitment process. But we feel like something that we haven't talked about, and that's why we went out and we sought some experts, was really the skill and craft of the interview, right? There's a lot that we invest in our paperwork and our cover letters and how we present ourselves. But when the rubber hits the road, it's the interview that really is the make or break for many of us in that process. And so I asked Tico Ohms and JP Mallais to come and have a chat with me. Both of them are busy and active in the recruitment space, supporting candidates in finding their next steps. In particular, Tico really focuses on helping people navigate their leadership journey and move into leadership. And he's been working with ALOC in particular. He's going to be with the Lead to Succeed group in spring, working on sort of a leadership cohort and supporting them. JP from JP Mint Consulting has been for almost 4 years supporting teachers, finding that next great spot for them. And both of them cover both sides of the equation. They have been recruited, they have job seeking and looking for their next step as being classroom teachers. And then they have also been on the other side of recruiting people and hiring people as principals in international schools. So I want to welcome, that is the longest introduction I've had to give.
I was going to
All
say,
this
is this 20-minute
context,
intro?
all this context, because I want to make
No,
people
it's good.
make sure people know who these two strangers are that we invited. So Tico and JP, welcome to the Voice of Thai podcast. Thank you for joining me.
And
Thank
three continents represented today. That is crazy.
This was a tough one to schedule.
Yes.
So you know where everyone is. Tico is in Bangkok at Ear Coast, right? Are you going to Ear Coast, Tico?
I just came from an Ear Coast social, yeah.
Okay. I
Mm.
am in the Netherlands, in JP is in Mexico. So we really do cover the whole gap of the world. This was pretty much the only time we could have all met that made
Yes.
sense
That's exactly
for
right.
all of us.
When
So
we're all awake.
when we're all awake. It's great for me. It's the middle of my day. It's
Mm.
no big deal. All right. So both of you have a lot of experience with international education. So if we can start with you, JP, in just like a minute or so, you know a lot about interviewing, you're supporting candidates in this process. Like, what's your background in international education and what brought you to where you're supporting people now?
So I'm a Canadian educator that was nervous about entering the Canadian classroom. So I went overseas right away. As soon as I
Oh,
got my
wow.
Bachelor of Ed, I went to Korea and I taught English for 3 years. And then I kept running into these people from places like Seoul Foreign School and Yongsan International School. I was like, what are you guys doing? And I found out there was this whole international school world out there. So I went back to Canada to get some more experience teaching, and then I went immediately overseas. So I was in Turkey, I was in Oman, I was in Korea and China, and then I landed in Mexico, and I've pretty much stayed. This is going to be my forever home. But yes, 20 years in international and a wide variety of schools from for profit, nonprofit, IB, AP, all of that good stuff and then worked my way through also the echelons of the hierarchy in the sense of teacher, classroom teacher, head of department, dean of students, vice principal, and then principal in Mexico. So
That's
that's
something
it.
that the three of us really have in common. We've been in all the roles in a school. Yeah. So
Mhm.
Tico, tell
Right.
us a little bit about like your pathway and your journey into this point of your career.
Sure. Well, the beginning, JP and I were in different places, and then I think the end of our journey was very similar. But I think I can't start with the education piece. I have to start that I have an MBA, and I actually was in international business, and so I was in charge of laptops for Dell Computers Asia Pacific for the region, and so I was doing a lot of traveling around the region. However, I had known for a long time in my heart of hearts that I was a teacher at heart. That was my calling. And so I did a mid-career switch. I got a master's of education. And I thought I would spend the rest of my career in the classroom. There was no motivation for me to recreate the challenges of a business person, but in an educational setting. I really
Right.
wanted to retire a teacher. And then some of those skills that I picked up in the business world were useful in the world of education. I mean, let's face it,
Yeah.
I deal with a lot of aspiring and new leaders, and teaching skills don't transfer that well into leadership. We'd like to pretend it does, but it's hard. And
It's
so,
true.
so some of those skills I helped to run some programs, and I went into leadership. And like JP, I worked myself. I worked up from teacher to department head to reluctant vice principal and principal. And I tended to work at big nonprofit schools, a
Yeah.
la Singapore American School, International School, Bangkok type of schools. Yeah.
All
And
right. Well,
I've
I
been in
really
international education for 25 years. So yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
my
between the three of us, we have about 75 years worth of international educational experience here. So, one of the things that I'm really interested in seeing from you before we even, jump into just the interview tips is because of your experience in international schools on sort of both sides of the table, being hired and hiring, and then the way you're supporting people right now in this process. Are you seeing some things like in the international teaching landscape that are shifting or changing that it's like maybe a good idea to be aware of as you're going through this process? And I think we'll just like JP, I'll start with you and then we'll bounce over to Tico for this.
Yeah, I can say that I've seen a few shifts in the interview realm of storytelling and evidence-based examples. So what I'm seeing a lot of is don't tell me, kind of show me, but in an
Right.
interview situation. And I often recommend like coming up with sort of a Rolodex of stories that can fit various scenarios so you have them ready with a latching on with a student's name because a first name, is very anonymous. It's okay, but it'll remind you of that student or that story.
Mm,
And then having that ready when they ask, when have you run into a conflict problem with parents or when have you struggled with differentiation in the class, you have these stories ready. And I think a lot of times interviewers remember that more than your answer.
Yeah, JP, can I jump on that? 'Cause I've got some different things, but I also like what you were saying. And I also talk about having stories ready. And one of the things is you don't need that many stories because the same story can
mm-mm,
answer five different
Mhm.
questions.
Mhm.
So, for example, if someone said, I did this really cool student-led project for a day, and they're applying for leadership, well, tell me how you personalize learning. Tell me how you overcome resistance. Tell me how you are an innovative how do you prepare faculty for something that they might not be? There's so many things that story could cover that three or four stories should really be able to cover all sorts of different questions. And I like what you said. It's you have to have that evidence. You can't just say these
yeah.
are my beliefs.
Mhm.
This is what I think. You have to be able to demonstrate it. And I would say one of the changes is they asked for it before. So there's a lot of pre-screening questions that are
Right.
asking for that exact evidence even before the interview in order to get to the interview stage.
Well, and we were just talking, JP, about the kind of the electronic interview where you're doing an interview with a screen. I've been in that position. I know it's happening in more and more schools that your first initial contact with the school is actually with a program
Mhm.
that's interviewing you or giving you questions so that they're able to evaluate and listen to you speak and address that before they even decide if they're going to do a face to face. You said you've seen a couple of schools doing that. Like Tico, like where do you guys see this as something that's coming? Is people using an initial filter?
I think as international education gets more known, the applicants are bombarding schools with their applications,
Hmm.
and schools are feeling overwhelmed with the quantity. I mean, we've all heard hundreds of applicants for one position. How do you filter through that? And so some schools are looking at innovative ways to introduce what I call robot video
Yeah.
interviews because essentially you're talking into that screen, into that sort of green light and trying your best to answer the question succinctly. And then someone at the other end has to go through all that hundreds of hours of videos. I can only imagine what that would be like, but filtering through until you get a live interview.
Mhm. Fantastic. And that's true. And there's also folks that just do it the old school way, but they still want some pre-interview evidence before you get to the evidence. So send me an
Right.
artifact that demonstrates your ability
Mhm.
to blank. Send me an artifact or give me the story of this that you've
Right.
made this impact in a school or something like that. And that's, you know, on that leadership side, again, there's the talk with the recruiter that says, yep, yay or nay. And then often that very next space is send me some artifacts that demonstrate you can make an impact at a school.
Well, for me, it's nice hearing this because, I mean, you all are supporting so many people, but that's one of the things that's really important to us at TIE is using evidence. Our evidence is aligned to standards, but one of the things is we've moved increasingly online and we've maybe lost that face-to-face contact in the same way that we're used to having it at a recruiting fair is how can we give people more and better information to make these really important decisions for our school. So I just wanted to kind of go into kind of that background of the recruiting landscape. And now I really want to like tap into your expertise. You've already given some really good advice around storytelling, around evidence, and that like Tico, I take your point about like it can't just be your beliefs. Like I always think about like how do you talk about your values, but I also always say, and then how does the evidence attach to those values for what happened and what the impact was and what you observed. So when you're thinking about reviewing or thinking about interviewing candidates, what is some of the quickest ways that a candidate might lose your attention on paper and not even be able to make it to the interview spot?
Well, I mean, from a point of CVs and cover letters, I think mistakes. If you have any mistakes, it's like, oh my gosh, please, please get someone else to read your documents because I think we sort of have a blind eye when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say like not big mistakes, just even little typos. It just shows a little bit of a lack of care. So make that extra step, get somebody to review. But the other thing is if there's long, long, long descriptions of what that job entails, but everyone else will be saying the same thing. So if you are saying, I make lessons, formulate assessments, I collaborate with my colleagues on a daily basis, everyone else is saying the same
Yeah.
thing.
Everyone else
So
also breathes. Everyone else also has lunch.
Yeah, that's
how
just
do
the
you
job.
get out of what do
Exactly.
you yeah, what can you elicit that is unique to you? And in fact, at the recruitment symposium last week, I heard if you weren't there, if you disappeared, what what would be missing? So like what did
Right.
you bring to that job or to that school that was an added bonus? And I always think that heads of school and HR, they're looking for added value. If everyone is a teacher and everyone has those boxes ticked, what do you add to that?
Well, and I think when I hear that, like this is a part of the interview thing, like what's going to shape some of those questions that you get asked? Like you want it to be about the really engaging and interesting parts of your resume that you're able to really demonstrate and kind of show off in the process. Like that's going to help lead to those interview questions. Tico, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, yeah, a few things. Like I do think how it looks makes a difference. If you want to go from pile A to pile B, it should look nice. It should be laid out nice. It should have plenty of white space. And then white space is created by filtering out a lot of the things that JP is talking about that really don't make you stand out or don't add value. And so, I was joking once with someone. I was like, you're saying that you are technologically savvy and you are about to turn in a resume that could have been done in 1984 or something, right? Like resumes look different now. And if you have a
Mm.
photo, make sure it's a professional photo. I know
Yeah.
we'd like to think we're above this, but someone's just filtering out quickly. that's that first impression that used to be physical, this is the resume equivalent of a first impression. And then I also look at what these bullet points look like. And so one of the first cuts is tell me about kind of how active that verb is. I supported, I
Mm,
coordinated. Those aren't very impactful. I led, I
Right.
initiated. I give me some verbs that says you made a difference. And when you change your verbs, also do that what, so what kind of thing. Okay, you did that, so what? And
mm,
so maybe see if you can add, I did this, and now students are here. That
yeah.
those kinds of things, I think, um, are important to look at. And then I talk about the big filter, which is just because it was really meaningful for you, just because you're really proud of it, that's not
Mm,
the filter. The filter is it going to get you the job or not? So there's just a pruning of things that
hmm.
hurt you in the heart, but if it's not going to get you the job, prune it out, have some white space, because if you don't do that, you dilute your strengths.
Exactly. I always say you can't include everything. You cannot include
Yeah.
everything.
I had a friend who used to, this is like, now that we have ChatGPT, I'm sure you don't, people aren't using word clouds as much as they used to. But he used to take his resume and his like cover letter and pop it into the word cloud. And if like students like weren't one of the biggest like words in the word cloud, he's like, I need to go back
Mm,
to it because he wanted to be really clear on like what he was targeted at. And I would think now with like ChatGPT, like doing some analysis on your resume would also
Mm.
be wise. So like what can you learn from some outside critical analysis about how it's coming across and what are some of the big messages that you may intentionally or unintentionally be sending in that
and
resume.
just
Would you recommend people leveraging some AI in this process as
Yeah,
well?
just be careful of the word salad because that's the that's the thing is when someone gives me a cover letter that is so obvious AI, it's just like a jumble of words and it's not really saying anything and it's not very
Yeah.
impactful. So that I would say that's another
Oh,
tip that I when if I see that, it kind of sends off a bit of a red flag. Like, how come you couldn't come up with a cover letter that was a bit original, that was a bit succinct and all that good stuff?
Oh, well, unfortunately, I have a story about that. Like a couple of years ago, I applied for a role and I've never been complimented on my cover letter ever before. Like I really hate doing them. I think they're painful. Um, and so I used ChatGPT and I just popped in the resume, I just popped in the JD and had a cover letter created. Only time I've ever received a compliment on a cover letter was
Wow.
I actually wrote about that in Thai. Like,
Wow.
like because I mean, if you're putting the
It's
right
getting better.
information in, it's getting better. But it's so funny that you bring that up because I do think like so we are now a lot more savvy and sensitive to what
I,
is
I,
ChatGPT than maybe we were a few years ago.
yeah, and I also think that ChatGPT is stronger in that narrative type writing.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT will absolutely do what JP said and put a bunch of words together that is just edu speak nonsense with no
Nonsense.
meaning, no what was this? It was just a series of random. So I think it's stronger in the narrative, but not as strong in the bullet point kind of
And
succinct
then
type of
that's a
stuff.
really good
Yeah.
observation. That's okay. All
I would
right.
also say you
Go
could
ahead.
leverage AI for interview questions. So something
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
I just learned at the symposium, a shout out to Warren Reed in the States. He talked about popping the job description into ChatGPT and saying, what are some questions I could be asked? And specifically to this job, and then you can practice those on your own time before you get to the interview stage.
And I would say the other thing that I would pop in there is like, what are the school's strategic initiatives and directions? Because a lot of times those are the changes that are being made that people want to know where are you at in X skill or understanding of this approach or process that we're implementing. I think you could even put more information in it to like
Sure.
go beyond just even the JD.
Yeah, give a
Yeah,
context.
Yeah.
you can throw in that JD and so um, ask it, what is it that they're looking for? Summarize that.
Mm.
And then again, give me, but I usually preview it with what are different types of interview questions? Okay, there's situational, there's behavioral, there's
Right.
visionary, there's values. And so I feel like if I preview that question just before I ask it to generate interview questions from the job description, it tends to give me a more well-rounded set
Mm.
of interview
Questions.
questions to work from. But I also think it's nice to ask it, what are they looking for? Oh, they're looking for this, and that's a good thing also to help prepare for the interview as well. But yeah, pop that JD
In
into,
there.
I mean, if it's a PDF, super easy. Have it upload it and then just start asking a series of questions of ChatGPT, including the questions. And by the way, ChatGPT will even give you suggested responses.
Yes, I was
Yeah.
going to say they could give the
Well,
answers too.
and I was just going to say, like, what would be some of your recommendations to people to, okay, we've talked about, AI in the process, but I've jumped through the hoops. I'm going to the interview stage. What are
Mhm.
some of your core, you've talked about
Stacy,
stories.
can I
Yeah,
stop
go
there? I
ahead.
just want to make a point. It's
Yeah.
for me, it's not whether it's AI or you, because I had when I was looking for work, I had a list of 100 different interview questions I
Yeah.
collected when I interviewed someone for a job or I was receiving, and I just collected all those and I had it in a Google Doc. I made a copy and I put a bunch of responses of what was true to
Yeah.
myself. That may be old school now, but that was effective for me. The bigger point is prepare.
Yeah.
Well, and
Like you
that's what I,
gotta
this,
prepare. Like I don't
yeah.
care if it's AI. I don't know care how you do it, but don't just show up and think you're gonna wing it. I mean, I was just talking to someone who said, I just don't come up with answers really well, at the spur of the moment. And how long have you prepared for the interview? Oh, hardly at all. Okay, this is a
Big
problem.
surprise.
You can't say, right?
Practice. Yeah.
Exactly. And practicing is everything, regardless. I think that's more important than how you practice, is that you practice.
I mean, it's a skill. Interviewing is a
Yeah,
skill.
it
And
is.
how do you get better at a skill? You have to practice. I always say, please take all the interview requests you get. Don't ever say, oh, no, I don't want to bother them, or no, it's a waste of time because I'm not going to go to that school. You never know what's going to happen. Take all the interview requests because they're great practice. It's great information on what is being asked out there nowadays. You can kind of carve out your answer with the practice and start to see, oh, lately my answer's been getting tighter, more succinct, and better spoken. And so definitely please take all the interview requests you get.
And I
Yeah.
would add to that, like, you can practice with a friend. You can practice with a partner so that that same document with 100 interview questions, I have that same document as well that I usually end up giving to somebody and saying, like, sit me down for a couple of hours and grill me
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
tell me when I'm not being concise or succinct or I'm not telling stories and I'm not connecting you to my stories, my values, my impacts. Like, would you also recommend that, like, actually formally sit down and practice with people?
Or use technology. I always say, we all have a computer in our pocket. Just set it up on your laptop, record yourself, see what you look like. This might be a little, contentious, but aesthetically, you want to find a nice background that is not distracting. You want to be in a situation where they can see your face and you're not backlit. These things we think are obvious, but it is actually interesting to see on a regular basis people coming into video calls and we can't see their face. So then you sort of lose that connection, that ability to connect. So even little things like that, like wear something that you would normally wear to an interview. Don't show up, in a ripped out holy t-shirt and think, well, it doesn't matter because it's video. It matters. So all of that aesthetics as well.
Do you have other
Agreed.
things around those types of things that Jack is talking about, JP is talking about?
For video interviews, I think everything, and I, I feel like these things were talked about. We had COVID, so we did so much. I hope we learned, but have the height of the camera at the right place. Don't have people looking up your nostrils or down at the top of your head. That's one that folks get wrong. But this is the equivalent of a resume that's poorly put together. You
Yes.
want to demonstrate, everyone says that, my work should speak for itself. You're like, it's
Mhm.
style and substance. It's got to be both. You've got to demonstrate that you've sweated all the small stuff because those things are going to be a reflection of who you are.
Well, and I think they ultimately are a reflection of your degree of interest in the job, right? The seriousness and the gravitas by which you approach that
Mhm.
opportunity. And when it lacks seriousness or gravitas, that translates into poor impressions. If
I
you,
once had somebody eat during their interview. And I thought, okay, you may be busy. You may have just come back
yeah,
from school and now you are sitting down and having this interview with me, but honestly, I do not want to see you eat your muffin during an interview. So,
Oh,
it's things like that where people take it for granted that yes, we're all human, but at the same time, there's got to be, like you say, some seriousness to it because people are hiring for across the world. They're going to
yeah.
fly you across the world, pay a lot of money to get you set up and go into a classroom. They need to know you're going to take this seriously.
yeah. Yeah. And if I could go back to the practicing part, um, I think that when you're so good that you're faking surprise at the question because you've prepared
Oh.
so well.
Mm,
That's when you know you're there. Oh, that's a very good question. Let me pause and pretend I'm thinking because actually I have practiced. I am ready. And trying to get to that level, it's not an unrealistic aspiration. You know, the
mm,
questions tend to gravitate. I mean, there's 10 different questions to say what brings strengths are you bringing to the school. Right? There's 10
yeah.
different questions about how you overcome adversity or something like that. There are different ways of asking it, but yeah, I think you can prepare well. And then the other part with preparation is don't, and I think this goes back to what you're saying, Stacy, is practice it like it's real. In other
Yes.
words, uh, tell me about a time, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, I'll say blah, blah, blah. And then about that thing, the blah, and then the yada, yada. And then I'll say this. No, practice is for real.
Mhm.
Use the
Yeah.
exact words, because if not, you're not going to find the words. So use the words, practice like it's right then and there, so that you're not fumbling around for the right terminology.
I know one thing
Another
that I
tip.
always, sorry, I'll just one second.
Go
I know
ahead.
one thing that I always do that I think is a huge advantage to take advantage of when it's an online interview is, when I'm at my desk and I've got my computer all set up, and what they can't see is the post-its that I have
Yes.
everywhere that I have taken their values. I have hit the main ideas of the vision or the mission so that I can grab in onto their language and use their language in my response and echo my alignment with who they say they are and how I respond. Like, is that something that you're talking to
That's
candidates about?
exactly what I was just going to say was have post-its, colored post-its around the frame of your computer with your answer bullet pointed in the example, so the person, the student's name and then the bullet
Yes.
points of what your answer is going to be, and you have, reflective teacher, you have effective teacher, you have differentiation, you have all these different post-its around. So when you're asked, your eye just naturally goes to the post-it and then comes back. And
Yeah.
it's not like you're looking down at your notes and they see the top of your head or that's
Mhm.
exactly what I was going to say was that there are advantages to
Yes.
online video interviews where you have this as a tool.
Yeah,
So one of
agreed.
the things that I want to ask, go ahead, Tico.
No, no,
Is
I was just going to say to the audience doesn't know that we're on video with each other. And when you said
I
that
know.
about post everybody started nodding, vigorously nodding, going,
Yeah.
yeah, cheat,
Yep. Yep.
cheat, put it up
Cheat
there.
Boost your
sheets.
environment. It's not cheating, it's prepared. It's prepared. And I also think it's just you've spent a lot of time thinking about who that school is. I think that is also really important is that you're not just any old interview at any old school. Like I know a little bit about who you are, and that's why I want to be
And
there.
can I ask,
Ooh.
sometimes those post-its are about things you've reflected about yourself. I say
Mhm.
all the time. So you said gravitas. Well, people should be okay. So for leadership especially, it's like this executive presence.
Right.
And well, kind of, maybe we should. I
Mm.
was considering it, that's all these hedges and fillers. So put a post-it notes, no no
Mm.
hedges, no. So to remember to speak in a crisp way. So it can also be stylistically, not just what the answer is, but to remind yourself how
Yes.
you want to present yourself. Yeah.
I've had to edit out my Valley Girl vocabulary over the years being from California. A lot of self-editing. JP, did you have something you wanted to
Well,
add?
I was going to say, you could also start preparing interview questions for the interviewer. A lot of times at the end of the interview, they'll give 5, 10 minutes. They'll say, "Do you have any interview question? Do you have any questions for us?" And I would say that could be one post-it where you have some tailored to the school, but then also
Yeah.
some nice generic ones that I always say it's nice to end with a really like fuzzy warm question, something like please tell me why you enjoy working for XYZ school.
Yeah.
And then they come away with a really positive feeling about the interview. And it's actually their own endorphins that were created from answering that question. So it's a little bit, psychology, but it's also a great way to see how they answer. So the content of the answer will be very telling as well, what they enjoy about teaching or working at this school.
It's really good advice. Tico, anything else to add?
Um, sure. I would say we talked about first impressions a lot. You're almost always going to get asked, tell us a little bit about yourself to start.
Yeah.
Have that one dialed. Do not repeat your resume. Don't go through those bullet points, but talk about what you bring to an organization. And so this is who I am. This is kind of my story. These are the unique things about me. And that's created for me this real strength here, or this thing that I really bring in this way. So kind of, we talked a lot about storytelling. This is the open-ended story, and you get to choose what you share at that point. So that's a great place to start strong and in an interview as well. So
So I think my next question is because in international education, our schools are often so diverse, whether it's faculty, students, staff. One of the questions that I have is around how do you demonstrate in an interview some of those competencies around like cross-cultural communication, empathy, rather than just saying like, I think cross-cultural communication is really important. I think da 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 is really important. Like, what are some strategies or some things to think about that, like that you're communicating like your values, at the same time. It's not about your values per se, but you're able to communicate that you hold some of the values that an international school would find important. What's some strategies to think about that or how to do that? Are you
yeah.
pointing at me, JP, or Tico?
Tico, because I've been going
Oh, okay.
first a lot. I feel
Uh,
bad, and
Oh
this
no,
is
I
his
said,
wheelhouse. This is
yeah.
this is
you
Tico's
got
wheelhouse.
You got great things to say. I think that again, it's about the stories you tell, how you choose to
Mm.
stay. And if your stakeholder is always the faculty or something, and we noticed that local staff weren't participating in this way, so we included them. So make sure that you tell stories that demonstrate or have some lens or angle about, okay, so we were teaching, and what we noticed is these kinds of something or a part of the population was feeling like they didn't have a sense of this is how we got them in. And so choose stories that have an angle that demonstrated that you had that empathy and you saw that as well. I think is really helpful. I think a lot of stories on the leadership perspective is about local staff and how you ensure that it's because it's been there's such a gap often in how local staff are treated compared to the faculty. And so if you can demonstrate ways that you considered them in your thinking, and I
Mm.
think as a teacher, it's demonstrating that you meet the needs of all kids and all the diversity that is offered from students. And then the last thing I was going to say is some kind of conflict that you were aware that there was a cultural component to that thing and said, this is not an issue around this. This is an issue about these values that come because we have. So, oh, you were thinking, just tell me what to do and I'll do it because you're used to more hierarchical style. And you're like, stop lording it over me and micromanaging me because you wish that you were a little more empowered and that does that make sense? And
Yes.
being able to tell a story that again, that demonstrated your awareness that that kind of conflict was happening.
It's really, again, going back to the stories and the evidence and really thinking through that and having that ready in advance. Jack,
Yes.
other things you want to add?
Yeah, I think curiosity plays a big part. If you can emulate or express how you use curiosity in a classroom where you want to learn about the students' traditions, whether that is a full-on 100% local student classroom or if it's one of those, United Nations kind of classrooms with 50 nationalities, you want to be able to tell the stories about when a time when you were curious and you were the learner. You were not necessarily the teacher in the classroom, you were learning. And it makes me think of my AP French class where I had French etiquette, where I talked about French etiquette, and then I turned the baton to them, and I said, tell me about what does etiquette look like in your country. And we had the Swede who said, we don't have etiquette. It's like, it's everybody's equal. What are you talking about? Men open doors for women, like, come on. And I got to be the learner in that classroom. So tell a story that shows your cultural awareness and empathy when you were a learner as opposed to the teacher.
I love that. I love that. And
Yeah.
curiosity also is a great antidote for the terrible way of kind of appearing, which is that kind of cultural arrogance. Well, in the
Mm.
States we
Yeah.
would, or from if you're in
Yeah.
Canada, but
Yeah.
curiosity is a great antidote to that kind of arrogance, right? I love that.
What about the question that you always get that it's like, tell me about a time that you failed. Tell me about a
Mm.
time that things didn't go. How do those make people so nervous
Or yeah,
sometimes?
what are some of your weaknesses?
What are some of your weaknesses? Or
Oh, I'm a
what are some of your weaknesses? So,
perfectionist.
I work
I
too
work too
hard.
hard.
I can't say no.
Yeah, I don't have any more space in my
So,
trophy
like, what's a
cabinet.
way to like authentically, like, address a question like that? Like, do you have any? Because that always comes up, and I think it's one of the questions that always people are like, I don't know how to handle a question like that. Like,
Yeah,
what
because
would be some of your
you're afraid of the
suggestions?
skeletons coming tumulting out of the closet, right? Like,
Right,
oh, so that's why you have a Rolodex of stories, including one where you have a conflict resolution and a happy ending. So the time when, a student and their parents came into the classroom and asked for a higher grade, and you're saying, maybe this isn't the way to go about it, but then have a happy ending. So have those stories ready where you are talking about a time when it was difficult, but then it was resolved and it happily, hopefully.
Mhm. Great. Um, Stacey, I think it's a pretty standard approach, but that STAR approach: situation, task, action, result. And if you want an extra R, reflection. So this was a situation. This is what I was trying to accomplish. This is what I did. This is how it turned out. And if I were to do it all
this
over
is what I
again, I would
learned.
consider this, right? So the star, or if
Love that.
yeah, and so that's you just have a star about a time when things didn't go so well, and then that
Right,
extra star is really important. On reflection,
Mhm.
I didn't realize that people weren't feeling heard or something like that, and I really
right.
needed to take more time. Um, Believe it or not, I'm going to go to something that is talked about. I think strengths finders can be really helpful in
Mm.
interview preparation. And so as you go through your strengths, what do you bring to the school? Well, I'm positivity, right? Well, I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful. And when everyone's complaining, I'm going to be the person smiling. When there's a new idea, I'm going to be a cheerleader because positivity is one of my strengths. And so I can use strengths finders in disguise to talk about what I'm bringing to the school. And usually there's some kind of category of what you're
Right.
bringing. And then you can use that kind of shadow side if they ask you, so what is it that
The
sometimes you're not
downside.
so great at? It's
Mhm.
like, well, sometimes I'm so optimistic or whatever. Sometimes I just don't see that this was a potential pitfall. And
Right.
that's the shadow side of positivity is this over optimism sometimes. So you can take it, for example, I'm an activator. It means I go from talk to I need action fast. Let's get to work, enough talk, enough planning. Well, that's a
Right.
strength. Well, unless you're impulsive. And so, so what is it where you go wrong sometimes? Sometimes I'm impulsive, and it's okay. And I'm
Well,
aware of
I think people appreciate hearing that you can think critically about yourself and that you understand who you are. Like it's a sign of maturity. It's a sign of, just high EQ to be
it.
able to talk about your strengths, but then also say this manifests for me in this way, other than because I mean, I'd be the one to be like, I just work too hard. Like I can't say no. You know, I'm pretty
But
sure I've done that in an interview at some point
but the key
before
is
I had more tools and
authenticity.
strategies. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yes.
key is authenticity. Be honest, own your strengths, own your areas of growth. As we like to say,
Yeah.
weaknesses are just areas of growth or areas of improvement, and be genuine about it. And I think that will also carry across. It won't be so much your answer, but it will be how you talk about it. If you are regretful or, show shame or guilt or something, they'll be like, well, this isn't somebody that's really open to learning about their, learning from their mistakes. Whereas if you are authentic and owning it, and then they'll see that potential for growth.
Yeah.
Right.
Can can I add one thing to the storytelling
Of
part?
course.
Beep.
I
Yeah.
I like this joke, and it's not a really particularly funny joke, but when, the whatever second grader was asked, "Can you spell banana?" And she says, "Oh, I can spell banana. I just don't know when to stop." And that
Yeah.
happens with storytelling and interviews. It's like
Yes.
enough. Like you are going to a layer of detail and granularity that you are boring us and you
Mhm.
lost us. That could have been a 3-minute answer. You could, so I think being concise is an important strength in interviews as well. And sometimes getting it right is hard because it's that
Yeah.
Goldilocks, that too much detail, not enough.
Mhm.
So just ask. But start with a little bit concise and say, I'm glad to tell you more if you'd like more details. But if
Mhm.
you've gone too long and they're
Yeah.
bored, and then you go, was that too much? You're like, yeah, 10 minutes ago,
That
too much,
that
right?
is a real danger. Like I'm glad that you brought that up because that is, I think, the real enemy of storytelling is conciseness
Mhm.
potentially. But
Hmm.
that's why I think the STAR acronym, that you shared, or having some sort of, in this situation, this was the behavior and this was the impact, some sort of thinking frame that you can attach to what you're sharing, because that helps you be more concise. And I think that's the other point to what you both have said. Like, tell somebody your stories and have
Hmm.
them tell you if it's going on too long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
have them edit and trim it. Say, that part where you went out, maybe
Yeah.
just trim that. Maybe just the other thing I was thinking was the follow-up question is key to having the interview feel like a conversation. If you go on and on and on, you will get zero follow-up questions. But if you keep your answer really short, and a good interview will say, hey, can you tell me more about this part of your answer? And
Right.
now you get gratified because they were listening. And now you get to answer again very succinctly, very shortly, but you had the follow up. And that will encourage more follow up questions.
Well, I think you guys are officially like my longest podcast ever.
20
Because I
minutes
joke that we
has
like,
flown
I
and
know,
doubled.
I joke that I like them short and sweet at the voice of Ty, but I do think that you both have had so much to share. So my last question, and this is like
I've got
personal.
one thing to say because
Oh,
I
oh,
thought it was from JP. It was actually JP. You were the one who was saying it. Put some thought into the question you're going to ask and prepare
yeah,
it.
Mm.
And it would take some courage, but if you feel like this isn't going so well, or you're getting that intuition that is there anything about my candidacy that worries you? Are there any concerns about me? And it's a pretty brave question to ask, but have that one in your pocket just in case you're still like, I've got nothing to lose because this doesn't seem to be going well. And
yeah.
that gives you an opportunity to go, is there something that they're thinking it, but they're not saying it? And well,
Mm.
you don't have any IB experience or so. Okay, well,
Right.
you can ask me that question. But now I've got
You've
it gives you an
addressed it.
opportunity to address something that maybe wasn't a question, but it is a concern. So sorry for
Interesting.
interrupting, but yeah.
No, I was gonna say, any last tips before I ask my last question? Anything you got to get in there that you haven't addressed yet?
No, I think we really this has been a very rich and back and forth podcast with a lot of tips. So I think I think people are going to be very. My tip is to go back and listen to it again and take notes. So first time, just take it all in. Second time, go back and take notes.
And I might suggest that you put us on a slower speed. I think between the three of us, we're all really fast talkers. Okay, so here's my last question. Do you have a ritual or anything that you do before an interview that you do to like pump yourself up, make yourself feel confident? Like what's a ritual that you follow before you go and you have an interview? Either or, we
So
can start with Jack.
Amy Cuddy did a TED talk about body confidence, like body, what
Oh,
is that called? Body
the
language.
like the
Yes. Hands on
stance.
hips,
Yeah.
superwoman, superman pose in front of I have done that so many times in the bathroom just before entering into, the realm of either the video call or the interview, or job fairs, going into a job fair
Yep.
situation. I'm just hands on hips, chest out, big deep breaths, and calm your body so that the nerves just go right into the floor, and now you ooze confidence, but without arrogance.
Mm.
Tico, what
I
about you?
look, I absolutely love all those responses. The question itself is one that isn't asked enough because it's so important to enter in the, think about all the times you go to a meeting and you feel like a rock star. In this meeting, I speak, I feel credible, people listen, I feel like and then there's another type of meeting, you're like, nobody ever listens to me, everyone's interrupting each other, I feel useless, and after a while, you enter those meetings with two completely different mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you enter the interview in the mindset of when you're going to be successful? So that's one of the things you've got to learn is like, I started entering this meeting already rolling my eyes before I ever show up, laughing at the agenda. And so the equivalent of that for the interview, what are you going
Yeah.
to do to walk into the interview? And and what's the mindset and preparation for that? And I think the things that JP said are full on. I love that idea. For me, a
Yeah.
lot of times it's just breathing. I want it to be quiet. I want the space set up so that I'm really, really comfortable with myself, not just for the viewer, but for me. Know that I am absolutely prepared that there's going to be no interruption, and I just sit and breathe. That's
Mm.
my, yeah.
All right. Well, thank
Yeah.
you both so much for taking the time to share your expertise and advice. I think it's something that we don't often get enough advice from. We get a lot of advice around resumes and cover letters and things like that. But really, where the rubber hits the road, it's the interview. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. I hope it's really helpful to some of the listeners out there as they prepare for these next adventures.
Yes. Just remember,
Thank you.
interviewing is a skill and you only can get
Mhm.
better with practice. So just have faith, it will get better. You will get better.
I always say also, how often do we have the honor and the opportunity of sitting down and talking about what we really believe about when it comes to teaching and learning? That like you really just get to share your love of teaching and learning. And like, even though they're stressful situations, they're an incredible opportunity to talk about something that you've dedicated your life to that we don't get to talk about that often in that way. But like, enjoy the opportunity to talk like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's right. That's
All
right.
right.
Thank you,
Thank
Stacy.
you both.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
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 Thank you for joining the Voice of Thai podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and our newsletter so you don't miss out on all of the stories and resources from the international schools community. Check out the show notes for links and more information for this episode. You can also find us online at www.thaimonline.com and in all of your favorite social media places.